I don't know.
You're the questioner, man. You're the protagonist in this. I'm the foil which you shall sharpen your blade on.
I was thinking you're like Stilgar a little bit.
You shall die and then you shall see.
Well, that was really, I don't know, I felt like that was really helpful what you said yesterday.
What?
About like when you were saying like what would finance do for you?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Because it's different for every person, right? I mean, we could say it's the same, but it's not.
Right. Yeah.
And we really need to know what it is for us.
Yeah.
The person has to know really what is that bottom thing that it is, that otherwise you're deflecting it.
It puts the whole, because like, yeah, what you were saying is like, when you ask yourself, what will this thing that I want do for me? It's basically like a way of clarifying what is it in my internal that this thing is a reflection of.
Or lacking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because that's like, as I've been just like kind of mulling things over, I've been thinking about that and thinking about how, in a weird way, one of the things that I wrote out after our call the other day about internal and external, the internal is, your external is a perfect mirror of the internal. I was writing out like, in some ways, when you said that in the beginning, I think the thing that I used to think was, oh, so somehow we will like change or manipulate the contents of our internal to produce the things that we want externally. But it's not quite like that, or do you think of it like that? Because in a way I almost started to think, when I started to write about this, the principle, one of the things that I guess I kind of landed on was almost in a way like how it's saying that external is a perfect mirror of the internal and kind of entertaining that as an idea is a way of kind of entertaining the idea that the physical is there as a means of showing you yourself. Like, not necessarily like as in a way it's almost like the principle, instead of being a principle of manipulation or transformation, even though it can be that, it's also like a principle of clarity, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, if the density of this medium is extremely clarifying in its solidity.
Correct.
It's like you can't fool it.
It's a snapshot.
You can't like trick it. Right?
Not really.
It's not there to be like manipulated so much as like as an indicator of like what's going on with you or where you're at, or
right. I mean, other than the one variable there is perception, right? Because you look at an object and it reflects to you all kinds of meaning, right? And you know, but some of that meaning is deeply personal. Meaning, you know, you remember an event in your life or something that I didn't have or anybody else ever had. So, you know, it has that reflection back on you. So that's where that little exercise, which sounds so simple but is not, is...
What exercise?
Ask yourself a question and then look what's directly in front of you with that question in mind, and that will immediately reflect back to you, you know, the answer. So it's one of those things where, like, that's a very kind of Zen, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, monk-like meditative state where the exterior being a complete mirror of your interior will give you answers to any question that you have. right? So it's like your surroundings will always present to you the reflection of your state at any given time, including your questioning state, as long as you frame it in that territory, right?
Can you give me an example? Could we do an example?
Well, I mean, you could just look at really what's in your field of view at this moment, right? Whatever that is. And if you stayed in, well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to call it cluttered, but you know, in some ways, yeah. I mean, that's why, where, you know, like Asian culture has really refined that idea, even from a monastic standpoint down to a cultural standpoint, where minimalism and, you know, a single bud and a single vase on an empty table in a room with 2 chairs, or, you know, and maybe one picture on the wall or whatever, everything is sort of, your eye will track to the piece that's different from the rest, the whole, right? So in that way, you know, you're refining the amount of distraction that you have. You're taking that out, and you're able to only, you know, but you can go in on that one thing, and it can then open up, you know, in theory, that one thing could open up into any answer for any question that you have. It's just your way of, you know, perceiving it on whatever depth, right? It's sort of like the Peterson idea of like the level of analysis of anything, right? It's like a big pixelated generalization. Then on the next level now, you know, down to the microscopic and the atomic level, right? And then, you know, the quantum level, basically. If you can, you know, obviously those perceptions are different because we don't see waves really, right. You know.
But I guess, do you really think that, I mean, in terms of your experience, I guess, that like as you uncover and clarify and rectify in a way within yourself those things that are lacking, that are representative of the thing that you want, that the thing that you want naturally occurs once that internal thing that is lacking is corrected.
Becomes integral with the rest, right?
Yeah. Becomes integral with the rest. What do you mean?
Thoughts, words, and deeds, right?
Yeah.
That alignment has to be there in order for it to funnel through into this physical, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, you know, I mean, these are all very, you know, in a way, it's a very simplistic idea. Not easy, but simple. But, you know, because that, it always comes back to us, right? It's like, do we have the ability to do that? Do we
have the ability to do it?
To bring it down to having a very clarified answer to the question, any question that you ask, by observing or perceiving your surroundings, you know, and so, but, you know, the trick is like you could, it makes you be very objective in some ways, right? Because, you know, we know all these biases, right, that we are going to bring to the table with that. And so, you know, for the beginning student, you know, you're always going to be overwhelmed by the confirmation bias, right? You, especially if you're sort of buying into the idea initially, and then you want it to be that. And so you want your initial interpretation to be the correct answer. And so, but you sort of have to, you know, train yourself to be so objective, almost Vulcan in its logic and reason, that you're just observing and you're taking in the information to whatever, you know, to whatever ends, right? Like, what is this really telling me? Where am I in this, my internal state? You know, is it, you know, some people might see a rose and only think the thorns, right? But some people may see the, you know, the red color, or some people, or if it's a red rose, some people may see, you know, really interpret their understanding of the softness of the petals and the expression of, the abstract expression of love through that, or whatever, right? Or a combination of all of those things. So it's going to give them a different understanding of their internal, of how they perceive things and where they, where they are in alignment with that. It doesn't mean that they're not producing that effect. It just means that they don't understand all the internal structures that are going on that are producing that perception of that thing. And it's reinforcing it constantly.
I feel like that's a pretty abstract.
It is a very abstract thing.
It's like trying to make a simple example, but it's extremely abstract.
It is. That's the difficulty, is that you're trying to take something that's, abstract but a simple idea, and then create a methodology to produce or not produce the end effect, right? You're saying that's the causation, or that's the effect of our internal, and then I'm, cycling it back and trying to interpret it and trying to be so objectively neutral that it only reflects, I'm getting to go through the mist to get to what I really think about that, how I really perceive that thing. And in so doing, how am I interpreting that as my internal, right?
Do you feel adept at doing that?
No, it's constant work.
Then how is it that you hold it as a principle of how you interpret your experience of the world so confidently?
Because the few times that I've achieved it, it's, I hate to say it, but it's worked like magic. Like, I don't know the transfer mechanism. Uh-huh. I feel the visceral sensation of the energy moving, and then that thing comes to be. But I can't tell you, here's the mechanistic way that happened, right, so that, we could just copy the mechanism and be done, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, there's just too many moving parts. So for me to have that confidence, I would have had to produce that at least a few times, by my own rules, at least 3 times. Yes. It's been more than 3 times, but it's not something that I can just pull out of my ass on a regular basis and say, oh, I'm going to do this, and that'll give me my answer. It takes time to go through that. So, it's more about, it's easier when you say, like, okay, the thing with the finance or whatever, because that's really narrowed it down now.
Yeah. Sure.
So,
I feel like it's something that people can relate to.
Of course, everybody can relate to it, right? Unless you're a bazillionaire, or you're really comfortable where you are and you don't really even have a thought about increasing or doing any of that.
Right.
Other than those people, which are, I'm sure, quite a small population, most people can relate to that.
Yeah.
So, so it's a good thing. But again, the process is the same no matter what it is, right? If it's relationships, what would a intimate one-on-one relationship with a significant other that bypasses all other types of relationships, what does that, what do you think that will give you?
Right.
And that's something that if you want it, means you don't have it. So what is that? First find what it is that you think the ideal holds in that. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to look at that and say, which is, with relationships, it's actually even more complex than finance, because finance it's like a finite thing, right?
Sure.
There's all these little, other variables in relationships that, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this.
And in some ways, don't you think of it as, depending on the importance or complexity of the thing that you want, or its degree of desirability, or just even your relationship to it, like, it's not necessary. It may be one core underlying thing or aspect of yourself that you believe that, or you think that thing will fulfill, right? But it could, in the beginning, represent itself as, many different offshoots of that one thing.
Yeah.
And you're just starting at the top, trying to kind of pick your way down through all the layers to eventually get to that core thing.
That if you had that thing, you could let that go.
Right.
Because it's like, once you understand that, hopefully things will be, so much more clear to you, that if you then start to express that in the rest of your life, the thoughts and the words and the deeds, if you start to express that in those ways, integral to that understanding, then that thing will be, you'll be walking into that, the created scenario that you just expressed so many times.
Right. Yeah.
There's some things that aren't just, like,
I
first sit up, put your feet on the floor, breathe, relax, light a candle, here is the process for meditation.
Well, I think that's, I think that, and I was saying this to Kira the other night, I think that the thing that bothers me about most of the people that are very popular that talk about manifestation and things like that, I think that the thing that I finally recognized as what it is about them that bother me, when I see it, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way, is that it always comes off as and is advertised as easy. And I think that, first of all, I don't think that that's true. And second of all, it's not just not true. I think that when you tell people that it's easy, or that here's a magical, easier way to accomplish your goals in life or make things better or whatever, it's then it's almost like you set up this incongruency within that person that, not only do they not have what they want, but there's this, easy magical way that they could get what they want, and other people are doing it. And so they must suck even more for not being able to create the thing that they want using the technique that this person is giving them or that they've gotten from other people or whatever.
Right.
And so it's almost more damaging than just the simple oh, I'm having a really hard time with this thing. Oh, well, did you try this? Did you try that? It's where are the voices of reason that are saying if you're having a hard time with creating something that you want, and even seems like things are getting worse, this is why.
Yeah.
And here's what you can do about it, or here's some ways that you can think about it differently, or apply yourself to the task that can actually, articulate those things in a way that...
And help to clear the debris, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really the thing that sort of deflects a lot of manifestation, right? Is the debris that's in between what you've experienced up to this point. That's why just doing the Barden method or one of those types of things, or even the Neville method or any of those, right?
Neville Goddard, yeah.
It's very it's very difficult for most people to be able to see let's call it an image or a vision in their mind and hold it so realistically that it literally is as real as your physical reality. So like a lucid dream, right?
Do you think that
that's a very difficult thing to do for most people?
Yeah, and do you think that that's kind of the mark of a person who has the capacity to create something without physical action? Do you think that that's to the degree that your imaginary, internal creation of an experience or an object or a thing, your ability to imagine something as real as physical reality, do you think that when you can do that, or the degree to which you can do that is the degree to which something can be produced by you without needing your physical action?
Without needing your force to force the issue, because you still have to act, right? Because that's part of that integrity, right? Thoughts, words, and deeds. Deeds is the one that most people, flip off, right? So
Right.
it's like, or they're all in deeds and their words and their thoughts don't align with the deeds. You know, they're busting their ass, they're doing stuff every day, but they're, you know, internally they're going like, fuck, what am I doing? You know, oh, why is everything got to be so hard? And they start saying things like that, like, oh, here's something else. There's always something else, and there's always some other thing coming down to crush me, or you know, like those things ought to hold power too. Maybe to, you know, a lesser physical degree than your actions, but energetically, those are very strong. You know, those are very powerful. You know, so. So we're trying to align all of those things into one point rather than letting them be diffused in many different directions. And we're consolidating energy rather than spreading it out over a wide field, right? Where everything just gets a trickle and nothing ever gets done, or it gets done so slowly we don't see it. It still works, it's working now, but it's kind of like we're in a place where you know, that's been so natural for us our whole lives. We think it's just an automatic, and kind of for most part, unless you take control, it is an automatic event, right?
What's an automatic event?
The environment that you produce.
That's the thing, right? Like, I was listening to Sadhguru, and he was talking about how, like, you know, like, he was talking about thinking about or processing different ideas, or solving different problems, or working on different things, multiple different things in your mind at the same time. And he was saying how, like, for the people that can do that, it's not like they're thinking about all, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things, whatever, at the same time. It's like they set up the thought process around that thing, and then they let it run. And then they can come back and check on it whenever they need to, or whatever. And he's like, it's not any different than the way that all of your organs are functioning right now. Like, there are different processes that have been set up that are, you know, integrated with one another, and you don't have to consciously think about them anymore. They're just running on automatic now all the time.
Right.
So that's kind of like our lives, right?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
a huge percentage of all of our lives is just
That's
like,
right. It's on
like,
autopilot.
It's like a huge percentage of our lives are autopilot.
Yep.
But not that they are autopilot, you know, in the sense that they're things that, you know, got imposed upon us or whatever. But they're things that we created, but they just have, you know, kind of a semi-autonomous nature.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, it's in some ways, if we want to make it even simpler, it's you know, the way that I think about it sometimes, if I'm really trying to rend it down simply, it's sort of the idea that, you know, life happens to you, or you create your life. You know, it's like, most people are in the life happens to me, and I'm just trying to frickin' survive the hour or the day, right? And it's like, okay, I get that. But at the same time, we've all been in that scenario. And, you know, and for those of us who try to look at it from another way, is that you're creating this. And so that gives you the control. Now, I'm willing to, you know, at least entertain the idea that that might be wrong, right? But, you know, is there anything wrong with trying to take control of something that, you know, is sort of on autopilot? You know, you want to take manual control back over again, right? But you can only do that if you understand these ideas and that you apply them consciously, right? So, and does that just bring up more stress? For some people it does. You know, for a lot of people in between, on that path of understanding and application, it can cause a shit ton of stress, right? Because when you first grab the controls back, it's like a little bit too much this way, a little bit too much that way, and the plane is, you know, getting squirrely or going into a flat spin or diving or whatever, right? It's like that. And as sensitive as those machines are, you know, we're talking about consciousness, which is way, you know, magnitudes of sensitivity above that, right? So that every little stray thought, every little stray word, every little stray action will cause it to, deviate from its good flying position to something that is either retrievable, not retrievable, or, something in between, that there's just a little wobble and, you realize it and you can correct. You have the sensitivity to correct that, right? That's why not everybody can be a fighter pilot. Even out of the pilots, not everybody has that kind of sensitivity, So it's that's why they have simulators, thank God, right? Because I don't know what the rules are, but I'm sure if you crash it a number of times, you don't get to be a fighter pilot anymore. You're not a candidate for that anymore. You don't have the sensitivity that it takes, to do that, and to the point where probably the machines will become so much more efficient and so sensitive that it'll all just be kind of AI controlled, not even by a person. And it'll only be in an emergency situation that the guy will actually get, control of the plane or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's a deep concept. I mean,
yeah, and you've said that like you don't put anything in your personal book of techniques that you use unless it's worked for you 3 times consistently.
That's just my personal rule. Yeah.
I mean, how many things are in that book?
I don't know, maybe between a dozen and 15 things, maybe.
That makes sense.
Takes a lot to really...
I was kind of thinking, in my head, whenever you say that, I was thinking, oh, it's like 50 or 60 or something like that.
No.
And when you are trying out a new technique, do you try to choose something to create or manifest or whatever? Do you always choose something that is something that you can identify as a physical change?
Or, a mental change or an emotional change in myself that, that I could really identify.
As being
completely different than what it was, or at least so different that I want that instead of what I had.
Yeah, totally. And do you intentionally choose goals that are maybe more like finite and simple so that you can like test the technique again and again?
Yes.
With things that maybe things that aren't even that important to you?
Correct.
So that you can be like...
It's more neutral, so you're not going to bash yourself if you don't produce it.
And you're not carrying into it the tremendous like internal think that, like we were saying about with the
desperation.
Finance, there's no like yeah. You don't have like
I have to do this or I'm gonna die.
Right.
That's horrible, because that's now you've really stacked another huge wall against yourself, right?
Right.
Because it's hard. I mean, it's hard enough to do something when you're not under stress of imminent death, let's say, or something that seems like that to you. But to do it under stress, I mean, we see that even in like, people in sports or people on, contests or whatever, right? It's like they can do this thing over and over and over again in a controlled environment. But once you put active people in there playing against you or whatever, and a crowd watching you and whatever, all of those things add to your self-consciousness and stress of the situation. It's hard to block all the distractions out and just say like, this is just me doing the same thing I've done 1,000 times successfully, and I can do it here in this environment as well. Can I block out all of these other factors and do it as if I was doing it by myself in the scenario that I've always done?
Yeah.
It's hard. we're complex critters, you know, and it's like, and if you think that all of your thoughts, you know, have, you know, they're constantly creating for you to some degree, at least in that amorphous, not quite physical creative category yet, but just a thought that pops in from whatever. And then, you know, to be able to, you know, it takes a lot of discipline to be able to have that thought and, you know, in the beginning, weigh out, you know, the pluses and minuses of that thought, you know, what would be the things that would actively try or passively try to keep you from that.
Keep you from what?
From achieving that end result that you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, then that's a lot to do all that.
And I think that the other thing that makes it so like stress inducing in a way is like when you say you are what you think about most of the time, the external is a perfect mirror of your internal. Really, the first, it's such, both of those things, although we can say like, oh, I can entertain that idea as real, or it sounds real, or maybe feels real, or whatever. It's like, it's almost like I can understand why some people wouldn't even, you know, like directly teach that to somebody or say that as like a teaching, because the first response is like, oh my God, every single thought that I have, or everything that's going on within me is, you know, like, you know, having, you know, physical consequences in my reality, and
right.
You know, and then, oh well, now what do I do with the thoughts that I don't like, or the things that are uncomfortable, or the things that are, you know, antithetical to what I want? It's like,
right.
Your immediate response is going to be like, well, how do I get rid of them, push them away, you know? And then
right, and now you've just created them even stronger, right?
And you've talked about that, right? Where it's like when you push something away, it gets stronger.
Yeah.
And one of, you know, I was watching Sadhguru, he was talking about how, like, with the mind, there's no division or subtraction. There's
only add.
There's only add and multiply. So
that's right.
It's like,
that's right.
You know, because yeah, it's like, okay, if we're an aspect of like the one, or an aspect of all that is, then we contain everything anyway, and are connected to all things anyway. So anything that you try to say you're not, or that, you know, resist or whatever, is like only somehow amplifying.
Right.
So like, what the hell do
what
we
the
even,
hell? Yeah, where do we even go with that? Well, that's why. It's like, that's what I mean. It's not easy, right? It's difficult to understand that idea, and then what would you do to, you know, to pare that down? You know, you're never going to, you know, you may be able to get rid of it completely, but it'll only be for a very short period of time, right?
Yeah.
Because things come flooding back, right? So how do you insulate yourself from that? Some people do it with going away to a quiet place. You know, I mean, there's the, you know, the writer's idea of like the ritual of writing, you know, where they go to a small motel in Maine where,
Right.
you know, they've always gone, where they produced their first book, and now it's become the ritual, you know, the ball players that don't change their socks because that's, you know, until they win the World Series, you know, that kind of thing. It's like they all have their rituals that are, you know, we can say superstitious, but, you know, on another hand, I could also say like, that's the process that takes out a lot of the distractions and helps them to narrow their focus into a single goal. You know, and so we do the same, just, you know, with these other techniques.
So you
know?
think of the means by which you are bringing your like attention or your thoughts, words and deeds to bear toward any particular outcome as being less about removing the obstacles and more about like, what focus am I using to bring all of my attention to the...
Yeah, because, you know, just like a laser, right? It's like if the laser, you're trying to bring the laser to a single point, right? So it's going to hit a single point, but that sort of takes away the periphery. But if you're like let's say you're a sniper, right? It's like they don't close their other eye. The good ones. They don't close their other eye. You would think, anytime anybody's ever this is the first time, blah, 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 when they want to close their eye, it's a thing, because they just want to see what's in that reticle, right? So the idea is that, but that means that you lose sight of everything else. So, the idea is to have this open eye so that it's passively observing all the other distractions, so nothing's going to sneak up on you and bite you from another angle or whatever. But you're able to limit that to such a degree that it's just sort of like passive, neutral information coming in, unless something spikes it to get your attention, right? And the other one is like 95% of your focus or 98% of your focus is on what's in that sight. And so, but that's a skill that can be learned, right? So, and we're trying to do the same thing. It's by, intentionally building up things that would help to insulate us from the exterior distractions or interior distractions, right? And including our thoughts that don't jibe with what we're trying to aim at, right? So, and then, allowing that, building that up so well that when you give yourself the command, that just, when you narrow your focus, that automatically pushes the other things away. So, but it's a very, kind of, I want to say step-by-step process, but everybody, one of the reasons that I'm constantly saying you need to make the work personal is because, what works for me to do that may not be the perfect balance of working for you. There is no one-to-one relationship with that. It's like, for some people it will be, creating a talisman around that, because it gives them something to do that, will be sort of, as they're making it, they're constantly thinking this will, move the distractions to the side and keep my focus on the thing that I'm trying to achieve. And this thing, I know, even though it's abstract, represents the culmination of that thing, right? So, it's just, it's like that, right? So, but we're just using different methods to do that. So there is no one way to do that. It would be so much simpler if we were all just working on exactly the same thing. And we all just knew that we were, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. And, and then, you did it. You got to where you want to be. The variables make it much more difficult because that means that we're all fingerprints and we have to find the right things that really not just appeal to us, because since it's a long process, you actually have to enjoy the process, not just the end result, right?
Right.
It's like otherwise you'll never last the amount of time it takes to sort of pare all that stuff away and make it, make your theoretical understanding and your application come together.
Right. Is that why
joyful effort?
Is that why? I don't know if I should frame it as a question. Do you feel a certain sense of discomfort in teaching, many specific techniques or rituals and things like that at this point because of that?
Part of it's that. I don't mind doing the basics because, you got to have some place to start, right? It's just, you can't just hand somebody a blank slate and go, yeah, just figure it out. It's like,
right.
No, I got instruction as well, right? So it's like, and then I just built on that over time.
Yeah.
And pared away this shit that doesn't work for me. And it's not that it doesn't work for me.
Was there a lot of things like that?
There's quite a few. Absolutely. And then there's, the things that you double down on your strengths, right? That's
Right.
the thing, more and more. And then if you want to branch out and be more well-rounded, if you feel that need, then do that, right? Like, look, I could have stopped at, lucid dreaming, because it was, it started out as kind of a natural thing for me. And it became more apparent that it, starting off from it being kind of a natural way for me to express those things, then I could have just doubled down on that and tripled down on that and just kept that and made it my one little niche of stuff, right? But I just always felt the need to sort of be more well-rounded in my way of thinking. It's like, I don't want to be, in just a more, let's say, perfected state, if that's even possible, in dream than I am here, right? Because I want those things that I do there to transfer here to some degree or another, right? It's like I feel like I'm much more my authentic self there.
What's the difference?
Between there and here? Or
in regard to feeling like your authentic self?
Well, for one thing, you've heard me say this before, it's easier to be more of your authentic self there because there are less distractions, even though you can create much more freely and occupy things in a much more, much easier way once you learn to stabilize and control and all of that. But it's hard to take that and then, like we talked about before, where, in a perfect environment, I can hit a home run 1,000 times. But in the middle of the World Series, with all these people cheering and sneering and whatever, it's pretty hard, right? In comparison. So you've got this perfect lab that you can, occupy with your authentic self. You can be as compassionate, as empathetic, as whatever, your highest noble ideas. And your world is being created in that way around you. And directed by you in that way, without the distractions, because there's no mental chatter there. You can hold a single thought. You can hold, you can have a quietness, where there's nothing going on. You can observe, experience, do all those things, but you don't have that, the Buddhist monkey mind thing going on while you're there.
Right.
That doesn't happen. It's one of the things that I think is, one of the reasons that state is so exquisite is because that mental chatter is gone. It doesn't exist in that place. So, imagine that here. That's why I think a lot of these, high-level monks that can stay in that gamma state throughout their whole day, waking, dreaming, whatever, is why they seem so serene, is because they never experience that monkey mind. They have been able to do that so well that they can literally, it's automatically blocked out, it's deflected. They don't have that. They're just holding their single thought, and because of that, and they're maneuvering through the world with that single focus, that no matter what happens, it's literally just an experience. And because of that, it's joyful, right? So, I'm speculating. I've never talked to one on that level to say, like, is this why or is this the reason? I'm just, I think about those things, and it's like, it seems to me, it's not I think most people think, oh, they're so humble and compassionate and empathetic, and they have no desires or needs, and they just express that, and they have this beatific smile on their faces constantly, and even when you notice they don't really interact that much with people either. Even going through the market or whatever, they have very, they're just experiencing and whatever, because that's the whole purpose, right? It's like they're just having an experience, and they have literally realized that, and so because of that, there is nothing bad. Even their death is just the end of this experience and moving into another experience. And they're so convinced of that. Not that they want to, but just that if it happened, it wouldn't be as traumatic as it would be for, a person that is just trying to get through from day to day. Just trying to get through and thinking that everything in your day is an experience are two very, disparate, frames of reference. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing that kind of comes up for me when you say that is I think of those two different ways of experiencing the world as one is very goal-oriented. Like the idea of like, oh, I'm just trying to get through the day or do what I need to do to survive or whatever, right? There's a goal of like survive.
Sure.
Right? Solve whatever problem I feel is most pressing, whether that's external or internal, whether it's relationship, whether it's health, finance, whatever.
Sure.
It's like I'm trying to correct something. I'm trying to fix something. I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm,
trying to move into an experience that I'm not at this moment having.
Right. And then there's this hypothetical state of being of everything is just an experience and I'm engaging, and I imagine that as being like, oh, I'm very relaxed. I'm comfortable where I am in the sense that I don't wish, desire, or need to be anywhere other than where I am because this experience is equal to all other experience because it is experience. And that's the only definition that I give all experience is experience itself.
Yeah.
And I modulate it kind of, I don't know. I guess it's like, I think it's interesting and inspiring that you bring it up because I feel like it's almost like the opposite of what I've known for most of my life.
For most people.
Yeah. And also, it sounds like a nice place to be. And I feel like I know what it's like to be in that state temporarily, right? Or like
Sure.
here and there, but not as like my normal mode of being in the world.
Well, that's the idea, right? It's like, you also have to...
And I guess the question is like, do the people that are in that state of like, this is just an experience, even death is just an experience, whatever comes after that is just an experience, like I'm cool with anything, I'm like, whatever. That almost sounds like I'm going with the flow and I'm just in the now and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but how many people that say they go with the flow aren't really, still want to have the rudder and direction?
Sure. I mean, I'll definitely give you that. But I guess what I'm saying is like the definition that I have about what that state of being or hypothetically is like seems very different than that normal state of, but what we're also talking about in a way, in my mind, it's almost like a blending of those two things. The idea of manifesting or creating something specific that you want or changing something about your life that you want seems like some kind of, but doing it through the internal is like, yeah, some type of combination or blending of those two ideas. Like,
right.
How can I be like, everything's just an experience, I'm totally fucking great right now. And I also am actively involved in this process of creating something different, but maybe not from a survival place or not from a problem-solving place,
right,
or whatever.
It's just a desire to move into that experience, to experience that,
But the ability to desire it, but also hold it in a completely neutral fashion within yourself. Like that's,
and it can't be
like,
completely neutral, right? Because otherwise you would have no motivation to move there, to have that experience. It can't be completely. There's got to be some draw, right?
But I mean, what would the process even be like? I mean, would it just be like what my conception of a lucid dream would be like, where you just like have a thought like, oh, I'd like to be in a different environment, and then you like
pop into a different environment?
Yeah.
I guess ideally, that would be like a pretty freaking high level of achievement, but bloop, That's like, that's God's state, I mean, or at least, some kind of ascended God knows what, I think, where was I going with that? To me, we talked about something the other day with like, how do you internalize successes, failures, projecting something, achieving it, not achieving it, or something in between, not quite achieving it exactly the way you thought, or whatever, like how I try to put those all more or less on the same kind of neutral level, right? Like, I use the grocery store thing, or whatever for that, right? It's like I go,
but how do you
I have a
make it
desire
neutral?
to go and get coffee. I have my favorite blend and I'd like to get that, but it's not there. Do I turn around and go away with no coffee, or do I get something that maybe looks different to me, or or I go there and there's no coffee at all? Okay, so now I'm sad, there's no coffee. So, I mean, how long do you keep searching for that? Or, and do you grumble while you're doing that and add more energy to it not being around? And, there's all these things. I mean, you can use those simple examples. And, for me, I'm always trying to put it on like, because I just want to experience it, more than like, oh, if I, I think the wrong thing to do, if there is a wrong thing to do for myself, the wrong thing to do would be to put it on a pedestal and say, if I could just get to this level of pedestal, I would be good for the rest of my life or whatever. But that means that the rest of your life stagnates too. And so it's always this sort of, this, relative balance that's constantly moving, right? It's like, once you get there, do you really have the mental capability to say, stop, I'm good with this, nothing that you could introduce to me or whatever would, I wouldn't be desiring to produce more or to do more or to get more or whatever, right? It's like you might take on those, projects that were interesting to you, that you would want to experience, or experience helping somebody out with that, whatever. But it wouldn't be from, a like grasping desire to have it. So, but I think that that's very difficult for humans. We're prone to, like when I've dealt with, and, I've been fortunate, regardless of my own interpretation of the interactions that I've had with extremely wealthy people, like up to the billionaire class. And except for two that I remember, most of them were miserable humans, and not like they were ugly people, they were just like, what their number one concern was? Losing what they have. That was their number one concern, where it twisted them in a way, It's like, instead of saying, I have more money than me and my heirs could spend in lifetimes, for a very nice existence. But as long as you're not trying to buy aircraft carriers or, a new plane every week or something, anybody can squander anything, right? But, instead of that, their idea was, what I have is a fluke. And if it goes away, I'll never come up with another good idea to reproduce that to that level. And that fear, slowly but surely, worms its way in and rots them, where their relationships are not that great, and their spirituality is probably almost nil, and, their health deteriorates, health being the big one, right? Because they're just in a state of constant fear all the time. Mm-hmm. They don't sleep well. They don't, they're constantly looking for everybody thinks they're driven, that they're looking for the newest thing, the next big thing that they can do. But it's not out of wanting to produce something good or valuable. It's to buffer their own, where they are with their financial territory. It's like so that's very difficult for people. We always use the lottery excuse, but example, right? That it's like, these are just stats, right? You don't see very many extremely wealthy people winning the lottery. I mean, I'm sure there are a few around, but very few, right? But it's mostly, average people. Well, there's a reason that 95% of them are broke or in jail, within 5-year period of winning the lottery, no matter how big the lottery is. They have zero experience in dealing with that kind of wealth, instantly dropped in their lap. And they get very paranoid. They ostracize themselves from their families and friends or whatever, because now everybody wants something. And, and maybe that's true, but maybe part of it is that just thinking that all the time, of course, and it becomes reality, right? And so, it just becomes, their existence becomes then like, if I have this now, how am I going to keep it? And how am I going to, not lose it so that I don't have to go back and try to, do something else to create it again.
Right.
So it's so we see it on not just on these high level people that have, worked and produced something that caused them to be exceptionally wealthy or whatever, but also in these average people that, had it just dropped into their lap, answer to their prayers, right? But then they end up, 95% of them end up in that same place, in prison, because they've tried to illegally do something with that money to create more, or, or they're broke because they, people either A, took advantage of them, or they didn't trust anybody else to manage things or give them advice, or they didn't take the advice or whatever. And so they squandered it, right? Like I said, it's you're pissing all this stuff away, because, you're not in the mindset of being able to handle that instantly. So I always think, that's one of those things that we've talked about a lot. It's almost like, when you think about doing things, and especially in the any of the categories, relationships, wealth, health, spirituality, it's like that old idea, like if somebody prays to God for patience, do you think he just gives them patience? He gives them more and more scenarios where they need to be patient, and it helps them realize it, in a more exacting way on a regular basis. When they have infinite patience, there's that old saying again, right? Infinite patience brings immediate results. So it's like, if you can hit that level of neutrality, then that actually is one of the best factors of, having that created in a much quicker way. The more you grasp, the more the water slips through your hands. The stronger you try to hold something, the easier it is for it to get away. So it's we have these examples all over in our, in our own cultures and in other cultures. They all have the same little platitudes like that, right? And the reason they've stayed around for so long is because there's a core of truth in all of them, right? They kind of hit to the quick. So
isn't that the same as relaxation is power?
Yeah.
In a way.
Definitely. Just from like a different...
it's a different expression of the same idea.
Different expression of the same thing, right.
Yeah.
Let go, let God. That's maybe a little bit less, right? It's like, that's sort of the fundamentalist thing, because it's like, but basically, if you, what does that mean? I can just let God and sit in my room and sit on the couch and expect somebody to bring me my food and to put a roof over my head and keep it there, and No, it doesn't mean that. It means, you trust that there's some exterior force that's going to provide for you in some way, as long as you're keeping the faith and doing the things and being kind to people and sort of emanating that out, But how many people can actually do that to the level that they're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. That's the catch. Nobody tells you that it's difficult to do that. They just say you should do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, the best, what's the best expression of the golden rule? Samadhi experience is, from another tradition, is the best expression of the golden rule. Treat everybody as you would want them to treat you, right? Well, in order to do that, you have to see everything as equal to you and you as equal to everything. And that's what the Samadhi experience presents, right? It's like you are one with everything and everything is part of you, right? So everything that you do in this environment to some little degree changes the relationship between you and it, but it's like you're constantly, you're constantly seeing that it's just an outward expression of you in some way, or a piece of you in some way. Every person is, remember that old, I say old because I remember it that way, but that exercise where it's like, see, with your interactions every day, with the people that you come across, random people or whatever, or your significant, whatever, right? Like every interaction, it can be a lot for a day. A day would be exhausting. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting. Not it could be. It is exhausting to do this. But see that person as a representation of the one, and that everything they say has, vast importance for you. It's like the one is look, for Christians, if Jesus Christ showed up in front of them, once they picked themselves off the floor and stopped blubbering, and trying to get forgiveness, it would be like, you wouldn't be distracted in that conversation, would you? You'd be like, once he said, don't worry, you're not going to hell, you're fine, I'm good with you. Let's have what do you want to know? What's it? Would you be like, oh, it's okay, no nothing?
Right.
You'd be, no, yeah, nobody would do that, right?
Yeah.
So, that's just craziness, right? So, I forget where I was going with that, but it's like, but the idea is that, to do that exercise is extremely taxing on your physical energy, right? When I did it, it was exhausting, to think that person really is, an avatar of the one to some degree, and that everything they say to you has some import for you. You'd be hanging on every word. That's the kind of attention that you would want to have with that. And so, just to show you how hard it is to do that. Well, now there's not a person in front of you. You have all these abstract ideas that you're trying to deal with to do that, right? Like this meditation. So now you have your own mind that you're trying to deflect some of the thoughts and focus on the right thing, and do all these scenarios, and and then all of these because if you're, I think if you're conscious enough, you're at least looking at the other side of the problem, and like we're doing that, like where's the devil advocate's position, right? It's like, why, what are the things that sort of wipe these ideas out, right? They nullify them, they neutralize them in some way, and can you really give that as much credence as you can with your theories and your ideas that you're going to express in a way that will make sense to you, right? Can you give both of those things and do that debating back and forth within yourself or with a colleague, because otherwise, those questions are going to just keep floating around. And that's one more level of distraction that's there for you.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was writing out the relaxation is power one, and I'm still now working on it a little bit more, I've been like in the part that says like why relaxation is power, and we were talking about how like there's making the analogy of, okay, there's these three levels to your being: spirit, mind, and body, right? And how for most people that hierarchy is reversed: body, mind, spirit, right? Body being taking the most, occupying the majority of your attention and directing things, then mind, then spirit, and how, through relaxation, we use or train the mind to consciously relax the body, but remaining awake and aware, kind of, let's say, opens up that spirit aspect of our experience.
Opens up the mind aspect.
Yeah, so
which
that's
then has to open up to hit that spiritual aspect, right? Because that's even more refined.
Yeah, okay, see, but that's the thing, but what I recognized even in using that analogy within the context of relaxation is power is that in my analysis or within me, because like, why did I choose to utilize that? Well, because you said it to me at one point, and I kind of, it makes sense to me from an analogy standpoint, but also like in writing it out, like really being hyper clear about like what it is that I'm writing, what it is that I'm saying. I realized that I was equating spirit, right? And and if I said, what's spirit? Okay, well, spirit to me, my definition of it would be my subtle energies, like, from like energies around me, my, energy body, my energies, subtle energies within me, my subconscious, and, any kind of genuine metaphysical or experience or perception, right? Whether that's like lucid dreaming or a samadhi experience or whatever, right? So we could talk about that if you want. You might have something much more to add to that, or a little more to add to that, or whatever. But I realized that the way that I was writing out the words made it clear to me that I was actually equating power with spirit, right? Which is interesting. Like, subtleties like that in like my conception of things kind of makes me more aware of like how I'm weighting things within myself, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the point.
It's like, whoops.
Well, no, because if there is actually a mechanism that we can get to, that's it.
What?
Like finding a way that we can see that, whether it's a writing it out or doing some methodology of ritual or ceremony, whatever, right? Or ability to do those things, then if it sheds more light on our true, our authentic self, all of those things that are in the most noble category of what we could express, and illuminates how that's being clouded or muddied,
right?
Then what more do you want? I mean, I know ideally we just want to snap our fingers and have all those things go away and our pure, noble self be present in the physical world at all times. But the idea is that, my idea is that, to have that happen would be just like winning the lottery. It's like 95% of us wouldn't survive the experience because, it's almost like you wouldn't have, the ability to keep yourself in a very, you would be fine, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to move into any experience that you wanted to, because you wouldn't, I don't know. Now I'm even
Right.
screwing myself in my head about
Right.
the way to articulate that in a way that makes it some kind of sentience there.
Right.
It
Yeah.
gets very difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like, but it's another good reason why we do this, because it helps to either clarify or show you where you need clarification in your thought process. The more clear we are on those things, the better it is for us. We
Yeah.
know where to place our
Because-
attention to either take down things that are not serving us anymore, or are not even capable of serving us in this more noble place, and to add things to that so that we can express that in a way that we can see is adequate to the task of moving into different experiences that we want.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing.
Because otherwise it's just escapism, right? Like, could I live in my, could I just let myself, not let my family drift away, let my, finances drift away, end up being some hermit in the woods somewhere, and just, like every day constantly just waiting for my sleep time so that I could enter my lucid state and be, that's Ready Player One, right? That's pure escapism.
Right.
The whole idea is that we do things, at least from a spiritual perspective, you do things there to such a degree and repeating it a number of times in the lucid dream, or some kind of mental state equivalent to that, right? To the point that it becomes so almost habitual for you, in a way, in a good way, right? That you just naturally express that here, and you can still, maneuver and do what you need to do and take care of what you need to take care of, but you keep incrementally moving yourself into this more noble place where you'd always tell the truth, you're never deflecting, you're doing these things, and you're treating everybody as though the way that you would want them to treat you, and with compassion and empathy and all of these things, right, without being a doormat, and there's the most balanced state of that, right? Nothing too extreme. So how do you constantly move into that? Well, it's experience, but here it's very difficult to manifest those experiences on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis. You might be able to do it for a very short period of time in work or whatever, and then all of a sudden something happens and it goes right out the window and you snap right back into the same pattern of get this done, ignore everything else. I don't care if I hurt your feelings. I don't care if it did it, like boom, 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 boom. It becomes very mechanical.
Right.
And so, it's like everything else goes away. Is there a way to be in that state but still focused on the end result, on the goal of that time, but still carry those noble traits through?
Yeah.
The ideal is yes, but it's very difficult. So how do you glean that experience? If you can, let's say the average person could only do that for maybe 10 minutes a day. Well, that's a long time before you have enough experience of that where you can get to 30 minutes a day or then an hour a day. But how do you get to 24 hours a day? That would take a whole lifetime to be able to do. So for me, the way to do that is to express that in that lucid dream state or other visionary states like that, and you have that perfect the perfect lab to experience that and act that out on a regular basis until it becomes, you don't know anything else. That is the default mode for you. That noble state is the default mode. And you see the way that those noble traits will get you to that same end result, but in a noble way, not in a caveman way. Or whatever, or doormat way, or mercy way, or whatever, anything too confining here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, that's the thing. So to me, that's the ideal. But again, it doesn't have to be the way that I do it, right? It could be from any of these other avenues. And I know practitioners that don't do or very little lucid dreaming. It's like, they do it. They do the same thing from a different avenue, right? A different way of doing it. Some people it's ritual and ceremony. Some people it's talismans or artificery. You know, some people it's, you know, God knows what, meditation. You know, some people it's yoga. Some people, you know, there's all these ways of doing it. Some people it's, you know, plant medicine. You know, but it's still all got to be integrated to here. Otherwise, it's a one-off, right?
Right.
It's like, you know, a fire ceremony, you know, at the end of a week-long shamanic retreat is a beautiful thing, but it's a far distant thing. How long can you hold that resonance while you move into your cubicle again, where nobody else knows what you went through, where nobody else, it's not a common experience, and you know, you're just one of those kooky, you know, post hippies, you know, that loves the kumbaya from a fire or whatever, right? And with like-minded people of the same ilk, and now that you're away from them, you just slide right back into your same routines. You know, we even have names for that stuff: reintegration depression, right? Because look, how many people I've talked to with this, you know, it's like they were only there for a week, and yet it only took 7 days for them to become so open, so, you know, with people that all feel relatively the same. They became this sort of almost like egregor in a way, right? And so, but then when they get separated from their group and put back into, you know, the piranha infested pool, they turn back into the piranha, right? So, you know, again, you know, that environment, you know, how long can they hold that internal to produce their external? Obviously, it takes more than a week and a fire ceremony, right? It's got to be integrated constantly. And, you know, and some of these places do the right thing. They'll say, oh, have a fire ceremony every new moon or every full moon or whatever it is. So every 30 days or 28 days, you're going to have a fire, you know, to kind of recharge that. How many people do, how many people don't, you know, life gets in the way, you know, it's like, but, you know, and what are you doing literally, you know, how are you imbibing that day to day to day to day to day, you know? It's like, you know, it's much more difficult, you know, on your own without your group, or, you know, where everybody around you is doing the same thing. There's no inhibition about it. You're there, they're all doing it, so boom. You know, it's the environment is supportive of that mindset. But when you move into an environment that's not so supportive of that mindset, it takes a very strong-willed person to be able to put out those distractions and go toward that. Plus, don't forget that the normal environment of people is when they sense somebody else, good or bad, odd, different from the totality, they tend to, you know, take that out, right?
And it's not just that person needs to be strong-willed, to be independent like that and make it work in that environment, but they also need to have, for me, and I think this is for me what I'm trying to articulate and express through the writing, and also do within myself as I create that, very, very clear ideas of like what it, you know, how it works, like why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because I think that's the thing. For me, I have the will. The will to do is not I don't think of it.
It's not an issue.
I don't think of it as being an issue for me.
No.
And I understand that it could be an issue for other people, but I don't think of it as a problem.
Yeah, that's not an aspect for your fingerprint.
Right. So
Right.
in my way of thinking, like, because I don't, like, if our whole thing was training people to have the willpower or the discipline to do something, then we would set up everything about how we, whatever we provide would be all about how do we overcome the obstacles that people inherently have to have the willpower, right?
Right.
For me, I don't hold that as having that high a value because it's just inherently part of me. So it's just like, okay, that's not an issue. Yeah, I know that it can be. I'm not discounting it, but I'm just saying, like,
In your particular case.
in my particular case.
Right.
But the thing that I do hold as being high value, which is also the thing that I feel that I'm constantly like needing to work on, is clarity of articulation in understanding maybe in some way the mechanism or the principle of like all these things that we talk about, so that when I am applying my will or my efforts, I am doing it with extremely clear ideas in mind, and I'm not conflicted about those. I'm not conflicted about the way that I'm choosing to use my time and energy, right? Because that's part of being in like a survival place or like under pressure or
Sure.
like whatever, is like everything I do is life or death, or everything I do is like my salvation or my damnation or
Right.
whatever, right? So when everything feels like that, it's like your mind is in this place of like, you don't get to fucking do anything that isn't gonna help, like,
Right.
dramatically.
Yeah, or even little by little.
Even if it's little by little, yeah.
Yeah, because, what we think of as being a little thing could turn out to be the, the little stone that when you move it, the whole mountain comes down, right? It's like we don't know those things, right? I mean, that's really one of the best things about, for me, doing the, really trying to find the origin of, where is that coming from? Why do I want to have this experience? Nobody says, I hope, nobody I know says, oh, I want to have the experience of being stoned to death.
Right.
Like that doesn't pop up in your head and go like, oh, I wonder what that's like. That might be something to experience, right?
Yeah.
It's always something that's perceived to be better than where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And so, nobody really thinks about, going down. I mean, so, and so trying to find out what that, origin or, that originating factor is that would cause you to want that, to want that experience, whether it's you want to have a Maserati, you want to have, you want to have the trophy wife, you want to have the whatever, right? You want to have the popularity, you want to, whatever it is, and stuff that's not so extreme, right? You just want the security of being able to, live debt-free, right? And, or whatever, be able to retire, not buy a mansion, but live comfortably, right? Not worry about food and not worried about being put into a home or, or whatever, right? Like it could be very, very straightforward and, very, what I would consider average, there's nothing wrong with that. That could be your highest goal. That's no problem because it's about your experience, right? So it doesn't matter. That's all, we have to judge that for ourselves.
But what we're saying is that a way to achieve that or any other goal is to address the internal misalignment or friction or whatever that's going on.
So first you have to identify it.
Because you believe that if you can do that, walking in, because it's like essentially the reason you don't have the thing is because the way your internal is structured right now keeps you from basically, like, you could put it in terms of like frequency or energy, like you're not in the frequency of that outcome that you want, right? Well, I want to move into that frequency, or I want to move into that dimension, or I want to have that thing or whatever. But if your internal configuration can't allow you to align yourself with that thing, because for whatever reason, right, then no matter what you do, regardless of how hard you work or regardless of how much you apply yourself, it ain't gonna happen.
Right. Right. Because let's just say, again, as an example, that, having enough finance, whatever that is, you find out that the reason that you want that is so that you'll feel secure, financially secure. Well, then that means if you don't have that, to some degree or another, you're feeling threatened, right? Because that would be the opposite of that. And so how much attention are you going to put to, deflecting the threats compared to, going toward your security?
And what does that look like internally? Doing that internally look like?
Well, again, like identifying what you think would happen. I mean, people usually build the threats up in their minds to the extent that it's, pretty elaborate, right? Like, I mean, because we're wired for threat assessment. We're hardwired for threat assessment. It's the only reason the species is still here, because we're too fucking dumb to be here it's not by accident, right? It's because we have this. So it's a very difficult thing to deal with consciously, to say, yes, okay, I walk into a room, if there's something odd in the room, I immediately pick out that odd thing because I don't know if it's to harm me. But that's my first thought. Can that harm me in some way? So it's like,
and even that can be extended not just to can that harm me physically, but that can also be extended to can that harm my identity? Because in a way, I think that especially with the world that we live in, or the kind of place we are at evolutionarily, like I would say that our ego structure or our sense of self does not just encompass our physical body.
Oh, absolutely.
But it also encompasses like what we think of ourselves and who we are. Right? So it's like you're not just identifying potential threats to your physicality, but you're identifying potential threats to your personality as well.
Right. Because I mean, it's the reason that most people don't ask questions, even if they have them.
Right.
Because they don't want to appear dumb to the herd.
All right.
Even knowing that getting an answer will put you in a much better place, you won't do it because the threat of ostracized, being, shunned is worse than potentially getting the answer that could elevate you. I mean, this place is set up really sneaky well, right? To keep us in this place, to make us struggle through this,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's a difference between hard work and struggle, right? Mm-hmm. Struggle is a different thing, right? Struggle is fraught with all kinds of, trying to figure out and implement it all at the same time, getting pushed back, like all of these things. You're struggling just to get through. That's the 2 strokes forward, 1 stroke back, right? It's like you're constantly doing twice as much effort to get half as far. Mm-hmm. So, it's, but it's the thing that we know compared to,
But why that happens at all is because of that internal structure that's not
aligned with, and that's why we hold in such high esteem these inventors and innovators, because they dare to be outside the herd, and many times they are outside the herd. That's the 10 dark year thing, right? It's like they struggle and they're in with a very small collective of other people that think the same way and are approaching the same ideas, whatever, but their families and their friends, they have none, right? For the most part. I mean, it's like they're constantly focused on this one thing and that's it. And everybody looks at them as they're oddballs and they're this and they're that, but they create beautiful works of art and they create freaking computers that, do all this stuff. And it just goes on and on, right? These aren't normally the people on the in the middle of society. They're the ones on the fringe that are taking the chances and don't care. Their overwhelming thing is the thing they're trying to achieve, not the things that everybody else says they should be doing. That makes it's hard.
Not an easy road.
Not an easy road. And that's like nuts and bolts physical stuff. Now you add in the layer of abstraction that we have, that makes it even harder. Because at least if you were trying to build a new computer, you could tell people, you'd bring them into your little workshop and there'd be freaking wires and things and bubbles going up and whatever. And you'd be like, I'm making a new computer. And they'd be like, wow, this is complex. Oh my God. Are you sure you could do this? But they could see a physical thing going on here. It's not like you're not doing something. Now, take that away invisibly, and it's like, I'm really working on my internal so that it'll be aligned with my external, and then I'm going to walk into a beautiful new world. It's like, and they're going like, cuckoo, cuckoo. It's very difficult, right? So,
Thank God for the people that
well, that's right.
can understand and appreciate.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So it's just another layer. It's another layer of thing. I don't look at it as any different. It's just another layer of something that you have to be willing to deal with.
Right.
And and it's not something where you're going to be able to show people. Seriously, if you if you do it right, it's never going to be.
Oh. Yeah.
It's never going to be something that looks like, oh, and $1 million showed up on my floor in front of the couch.
Right.
It's never going to be like that. It's going to be like everybody around you it's going to seem like you've always had that, or you've done something that, that's a deserved thing or whatever it is. It's going to seem like a logical thing because it
always fits within the structure of the collective consciousness. It always fits within the structure of the
individual too.
The collective agreed upon ideas of what's possible and what's not possible.
It's amazing how your conscious mind will literally oh, there's a shadow. What's that? Oh, it must have just been a trick of my eyes. Or, oh, I have this experience. That couldn't possibly be that. So it must have been a solar flare, or it must have been a we're very, very competent about explaining away phenomena that doesn't have any root in us, right? That we're not, we've completely been mesmerized out of that place, right?
Right.
So it's, and the mind is really good about filling those things in. Very good about filling those things in. So, even to the point of I forget this experiment, but it was you can read this paragraph, and you can read the paragraph but then it's missing certain words, and you have to literally go the brown dog ran, to figure out the words that are missing, but your mind has filled it in from the flow of the thing.
Right.
But the word is not there.
Right. Or the letters are all reversed or jumbled in the word.
Exactly. Yeah. So the mind is, and we're talking practically instantaneous.
Yeah.
That it's seeing that and saying in order for him to have the flow of reading, we're just going to fill it in the right way, or what we expect it to be.
Right.
So, one of the reasons that we do so much reading and theory and different angles of looking at that is to open our minds in a way that, our mind won't take a phenomena that happens to us and spin it into something that couldn't possibly, explain it away, right? It's because you've at least internalized to some extent that these phenomena could happen, or it's a possibility that even to somebody else, that it won't just immediately eradicate that and say oh, you didn't see the little lights dancing in your chamber or whatever. You just, that was a little, that was a floater in your eye, or, it's some optical illusion or whatever.
what you're saying kind of makes me think, and this might be carrying things to like an extreme of abstraction, bordering on metaphorical or actually metaphorical, but I'm entertaining the idea that it's a representative of, you know, the actual truth maybe, but like the idea that like, since all of your experience is generated from within, right? We're not perceiving anything outside of ourselves, right? It's like there is a physical support for what we perceive, but our actual like vision of this room or whatever is all occurring in our mind, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like because perception is to some degree, or maybe to an absolute degree, internal or entirely internal, it's almost like you need to, the process is structuring your internal to support the possibility of the perception that you want to have. Because if
Right.
your internal structure or, you know, whatever won't support that perception, it will never happen, because the perception is happening within you anyway, and you and you are kind of like the linchpin or whatever in the equation that's saying this perception will happen, or this experience will happen, or it won't happen, or whatever, right? So I mean, to me, in a way, that makes sense, but it's moving the center point of like my experience or my reality like completely inside, like instead of being like a negotiation between internal and external, it's almost like transferring the, you know, the center point of like experience, like
Because it's all focused on you.
complete, but it makes
But
it
it's
like
your perception. That's the thing. The best, you know, I think the best
But do you think that
exercise
that's an
to
extreme?
No, I don't think it's extreme. I think the best exercise to prove that to anybody is to teach them how to gaze. Because you're doing it eyes open, and you're not making it up in your mind. You're just perceiving, you know, and you're perceiving in a way, you're setting your visual perception state at a different, you know, than focus, you're divergent, right? And so, and by doing that and holding that for an extended period of time, you know, because you're not focused on anything, what are you not doing? You're not naming that thing. And after a while, the not naming makes the perceptual state change, because your mind is going, the internal part of your mind is going like, what the hell is this? What the hell, you know, do you want to see the screen? Do you want to see a chair? Do you want to see Dustin? But I have to give me a name so I can focus on that thing.
Or
right?
definition.
Or focus on that thing and I can give you a name for it. And that anchors you to this physical thing
Because
and the perceptual state that you're in. Right? When you start to lose, you know, when you make it even more extreme, right, then everything becomes sort of two-dimensional, no depth, right? And then after a while, even that picture, that 2D picture becomes, you know, everything starts to shift and move, right? So that it's like, because the mind is still going like, you know, the only thing I can show you is, the only thing I can let you perceive is closer to the actual, which is just these, you know, this energetic underpinning of what it is. You're going past that depth of physicality to something other. And so when you do that and you hold it for a long enough state, even that shifts again, right? So it's the easiest exercise to actually do that, because it's not like, oh, I'm doing it, then I'm closing my eyes and I'm imagining that. It's like, no, you're literally directly perceiving it. So it just shows you the link between your perceptual state, your visual perceptual state, and, you know, the way your mind will start to grasp at things to anchor you to this physical place, right? Where you are, right here, right now, you know, to the point of like even making you very uneasy about it, right? It's like You're not on drugs. You're not doing anything that's physically altering your perception, right? You're just doing this exercise. And so when you do that, you know, and it's constantly trying to anchor you in, because that's the known is safe, right? Even the bad known is still safe compared to the unknown, right? Threat assessment, hardwired. The unknown is always less safe than the known, even if the known is awful. It could be worse. It could always be worse. Yeah, there's the potential that it could be better, but you know, in our way that the way that we're set up, it's like, you know, that's like to get to something better is like threading a needle compared to falling off a cliff. So, you know, there's very little effort to step into something worse. There's a lot of effort to get to something better. So, you know, and you know, but I think that gazing technique is a good way to sort of like show people, you know, that, you know, getting closer to that state of, you know, that you're, you know, your level of focus and naming is what's really holding you in this place to function physically in this place. I mean, you couldn't walk around in that state, right? I mean, it's like, you know, it's because you wouldn't be able to function here. You'd be running into tables, or you'd be, you know,
Yeah.
how could you do that, right? So, but it's an interesting exercise to do, to sort of give yourself that idea. And you're not like staring and drying out your eyes, and you're not going cross-eyed or any of that stuff. It's literally just keeping your vision to the peripheral and not putting attention on any one thing more than anything else, right? You're just getting a flat peripheral view of whatever's in your viewing space. That's all. And hold that for as long as you can. Keep your breathing stable, and, you know, blink when you need to, and all of that. And just, again, try to really, if you had an area of focus, it would be to the peripheral, right? Because it's like that your panic state will immediately make you focus on a thing to anchor you in that place, to bring you back to the known, to bring you back to safe, right? Regardless of what it is. I mean, you intellectually know you are perfectly safe in this place, or your room, or whatever, your own place. You're perfectly physically safe there, you know, all things being equal. Why, just changing that perceptual state, why would you fucking panic? Because you're stepping into the unknown. You're stepping into a more actual perceptual state. Right? So it's the best exercise to sort of, to you know, for me, it's the best exercise to sort of
show you
convince
how
people.
fucking locked in you are.
That's right. And how many internal processes are, you know, are working toward keeping you locked here. Nobody else is doing it. I'm not poking you while you're doing that. I'm not holding you in this place. I'm not tying a rope and putting an anchor down so you can't disappear anywhere, right? It's like, that's internal shit that's saying, you're trying to thread the fucking needle, dude? Like, you can barely make it here now with all your senses intact and focused on what you're trying to do. Why the hell would you even take that risk? And just the mental duress of even being able to achieve it, and then know that that's there, but you can't access it.
What do you mean?
Well, like, you know it's there, but then like not have the ability to keep accessing it so that you have that other perceptual state as a source of information for you to live, right? To change your experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like, I don't know, you know, showing somebody, you know, a wonderful meal that they'll never be able to eat. You know, that's kind of torture compared to even having a limited experience of that and then saying, but you're not going to experience any of that because you can't do the things that you need to do in order to make that your reality on a normal level, on an everyday occurrence. It's kind of torturous.
I mean, that's basically
That's basically what I'm telling you to do.
what do you mean?
In a way, it's a kind of a cruelty when people, it's a little tongue in cheek, but if I want to make fun of it, it's kind of cruel what I've done, is like shown you a glimpse.
What you've done to me.
Yeah, shown you a glimpse of here, ooh, look at this, and but here's all the things you're going to have to do in order to get there, and man, that's going to be you're going to spend your whole fucking life doing this shit,
And isn't that the same with plant medicine in a way?
I think it's the same. It's just it's
similar.
sped up, plus you have. You have the conscious mind will constantly, whether people do it or not, even if you do it in secret, right? They don't want to expose yourself to that. But, even in, your mind, your conscious mind will say, it's because you took that drug. It's because you took that plant. Right. It's because, those are just hallucinations. You're just fooling yourself. That was just a mirage in front of you. It wasn't real. You can talk yourself out of that stuff, and it's on a certain level, right? And you go to, you get some of those heavier heroic doses and there's no fucking talking yourself out of those experiences. They're just as real when you remember them as they are when you're in them. Mm-hmm. You can recall them with utter clarity, right? So it's you can't dismiss that as being that was just a bad trip, or that was that was just a hallucination or whatever. It's no, sorry. There's a certain fee for entering those realms on that level.
Fee?
Yeah. The fee is that you don't get to forget it. You can't talk it away. There's always going to be that part deep in your subconscious that says that was a real event. And so, but then it's do you have the mental capacity to say, even if it was a really bad negative experience, what does that tell me about myself? There's got to be a lesson there. It's not just some random friggin' experience. I mean, it's being generated internally, right? So, what is it? How did I deal with it? Did I deal with it correctly? Did I not? Should I have done something else? What is it telling me about me? Because if I can modulate myself, I can change my experience. Yeah, plant medicine is just let's say, the lightning path, a fast track to doing that. It's part of that. I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it because, I only have my own experience to go on. But it's, because you're not, look, in order for me to achieve that same mental perceptual state as doing a heroic dose of psilocybin or something like that, it would take me hours to put myself in that state. And that's a lot of energy expenditure, even though it's meditation. It's not splitting wood, but hours of focused concentration to be able to enter a visionary state like that, and to be able to maintain it for how long? How much energy do you have? The energy to get there is nothing, right? But the energy to be able to maneuver within that, you got to have your wits about you, right? We've kind of really circumnavigated the weeds here. But hopefully at least it'll help you out. Some little tidbits of goodness there.